The blood on Beatrice Palmer's hands wouldn't wash away no matter how hard she scrubbed. And it hadn't been real blood for 3 years now. But she still saw it every time she closed her eyes or looked down at her fingers in the dim lamplight of her small room above the general store in Wheatland, Wyoming. The year was 1878, and she had survived things that should have killed her, which made living somehow harder than dying would have been. She pressed her palms against the rough wooden windowsill and stared out at the dusty Main Street below. The summer sun had just begun to set, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Wagons rattled past, kicking up clouds of dust that hung in the still air. Cowboys ambled toward the saloon, their spurs jingling with each step. It was a peaceful evening in a peaceful town, and Beatrice felt like a ghost haunting it, separate from all the living people going about their simple lives. 3 years ago, she had been married. 3 years ago, she had lived on a small homestead 50 miles north of here with her husband Marcus and her baby daughter Emma. 3 years ago, raiders had come in the night, and by dawn she had been the only one left alive, hidden in the root cellar while she listened to everything she loved being destroyed above her head. The details still visited her in nightmares, sharp and cruel as broken glass. A knock at her door made her jump. She turned, her heart hammering against her ribs the way it always did at unexpected sounds. "Miss Palmer, you still want these flour sacks brought up?" It was just Mr. Henderson from the general store below, his voice muffled through the thin door. "No, thank you," she called back, forcing steadiness into her voice. "I'll come down for them tomorrow. Suit yourself. Locking up now. You need anything before I go? I'm fine, thank you." She heard his heavy footsteps retreating down the stairs, then the jingle of keys and the solid thunk of the front door being locked. Silence settled over her small room like a blanket, and she was alone again with her memories and her ghosts. Beatrice had come to Wheatland 6 months ago, drawn by its remoteness and the promise of work. Mr. Henderson needed someone to help in the store, and she needed someplace where no one knew her story, where she could try to exist without the weight of everyone's pity pressing down on her shoulders. It hadn't worked the way she hoped. The pity might be gone, but so was everything else. She felt hollowed out, a shell of a person going through the motions of living without any real life inside her. She had been 23 when it happened. She was 26 now, though she felt ancient, worn down like river stones, all her sharp edges rubbed away by grief. The next morning came too soon, announced by roosters crowing and the sounds of the town waking up. Beatrice dressed in her simple gray dress, pinned her dark hair back severely, and went downstairs to begin her work. Mr. Henderson was already there, sweeping the front porch. "Morning, Miss Palmer," he said cheerfully. "Going to be a hot one today. Good morning." She gave him a small smile, the practiced kind that didn't reach her eyes, and went inside to begin organizing the shelves and preparing for customers. The morning passed in its usual rhythm. Mrs. Crawford came in for thread and stayed to gossip. The Johnsons needed supplies for their ranch. Young Billy Martin bought peppermint sticks with coins he'd earned doing chores. Beatrice moved through it all efficiently, making change and wrapping purchases, speaking when spoken to but never starting conversations herself. She had become very good at being invisible while standing right in front of people. It was nearly noon when the door opened, and a man walked in who she had never seen before. That alone was notable in a town as small as Wheatland, where she had come to recognize every face. But it was more than his unfamiliarity that caught her attention. There was something about the way he carried himself, a quiet confidence mixed with watchful caution, like a wolf that had learned to walk among dogs. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that needed cutting. He wore dusty traveling clothes and a well-used gun belt, though his revolver sat easy in its holster, not positioned for a quick draw. His eyes were a striking hazel, almost gold in the sunlight streaming through the window, and when they landed on her, she felt an unexpected jolt, like touching a doorknob after walking across a wool carpet. "Afternoon," he said, his voice a low drawl that marked him as someone who had spent considerable time in Texas or thereabouts. "I'm looking for supplies. Need to stock up for a few weeks." "Of course." Beatrice moved behind the counter, grateful for its solid presence between them. "What do you need?" He pulled a list from his pocket, and as she read through it, she could tell he was a practical man. Flour, coffee, beans, salt pork, ammunition, rope. Nothing frivolous, everything necessary for survival. While she gathered his items, she was aware of him watching her, not in an uncomfortable way but with a steady attention that made her self-conscious. "You're new to Wheatland," she said, more to fill the silence than out of real curiosity. "Just arrived this morning. Name's Owen Thorne." He extended his hand across the counter, a gesture of politeness that seemed genuine. She hesitated for just a moment before taking it. His grip was warm and firm, calloused from hard work. "Beatrice Palmer. Pleased to meet you, Miss Palmer." He released her hand but continued to study her face in a way that made her want to look away. "I'm hoping to settle here, actually. Heard there was land available for homesteading just outside town." "The western section," she confirmed, turning to add up his purchases on a piece of paper. "The land office is 2 doors down." "Much obliged." He paid in coins, counted out exactly, and began loading his supplies into a canvas bag. "You been in Wheatland long?" "6 months." She kept her voice neutral, discouraging further questions. If he noticed her reticence, he didn't show it. "Seems like a good town. Quiet." "It is. That's what I'm looking for. Quiet." There was something in his tone, a weight to the word that suggested he understood about seeking peace, about trying to escape things that chased you even in your sleep. He finished packing his supplies and tipped his hat to her. "I'll likely be back in a few days. Thank you for your help, Miss Palmer." "You're welcome." She watched him leave, his tall frame silhouetted against the bright rectangle of the doorway before he stepped out into the street and disappeared from view. Something about the encounter left her unsettled, though she couldn't pinpoint why. Maybe it was just that he had looked at her like she was a real person instead of a piece of the store's furniture. Maybe it was that, for just a moment, she had felt something other than the constant gray numbness that had become her normal state. Over the next 2 weeks, Owen Thorne became a regular sight in Wheatland. Beatrice learned from overheard conversations that he had indeed claimed a homestead about 5 miles west of town. He was building a cabin there, working dawn to dusk by himself, occasionally coming into town for supplies or to have his horse reshod at the blacksmith's. He stopped into the general store every few days, always polite, always respectful. He never pried, never asked personal questions, but he had a way of being present that was different from the townsfolk who barely saw her. When he said good morning, it felt like he actually cared what kind of morning she was having. When he thanked her, there was genuine gratitude in it. "That Thorne fellow seems taken with you," Mrs. Henderson observed one afternoon after Owen had left with a new axe handle. She was the store owner's wife, a plump woman who loved matchmaking almost as much as she loved gossip. "He's just a customer," Beatrice replied, reorganizing a display of canned goods that didn't need reorganizing. "He doesn't look at you like just a customer. He looks at you like a man who sees something worth looking at." "Mrs. Henderson, please." Beatrice's voice came out sharper than she intended. "I'm not interested in speculation." The older woman raised her hands in surrender. All right. No harm meant, dear. Just thought you should know what folks might be noticing." That evening, alone in her room, Beatrice found herself thinking about Owen Thorne despite her best efforts not to. She had meant what she told Mrs. Henderson. She wasn't interested in speculation, and she certainly wasn't interested in whatever the widow woman thought she saw in a man's eyes. Beatrice had been broken 3 years ago, shattered into so many pieces that she hadn't even tried to put herself back together. What remained of her wasn't enough for a normal life, certainly not enough for someone to look at with anything resembling romantic interest. She had accepted that she would spend the rest of her life alone. It was safer that way. Caring about people meant they could be taken from you, and she couldn't survive that kind of loss again. She had barely survived it the first time. But despite her resolve, she found herself watching for Owen when she was in the store, noticing when several days passed without him coming to town, feeling an unwelcome flutter of something almost like relief when he finally did appear. It was late July when everything changed. Beatrice had closed up the store for lunch and was walking toward the boarding house where she usually took her midday meal. The street was mostly empty, the heat of the afternoon driving people into whatever shade they could find. She was lost in thought, her mind on nothing in particular when she heard a crash from the alley beside the feed store. She should have kept walking. That would have been the sensible thing to do. But something about the sound, a desperation in it, made her stop. She approached the alley cautiously and peered around the corner. A man was pinning a young woman against the wall. The woman was Sarah Chen, the teenage daughter of the Chinese couple who ran the laundry. The man was Virgil Custer, a ranch hand known for drinking too much and causing trouble. Sarah was struggling, her face twisted in fear, but Virgil had her wrists caught in one meaty hand while his other fumbled at her dress. Beatrice's vision went white at the edges. For a moment, she wasn't in Wheatland anymore. She was in her homestead, listening to sounds that still woke her screaming. Then something inside her snapped forward instead of back, and she was moving without thinking. Let her go. Her voice came out hard as iron, surprising even herself. Virgil turned, annoyed at the interruption. "Mind your business, woman. This doesn't concern you." I said let her go. Beatrice picked up a piece of wood from the ground, a broken fence post, and held it like a club. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "Virgil laughed. A mean,